Thank you, Senator King, and let me also, on behalf of the committee, recognize the Inter-American Defense College. Bienvenidos. Senator Tuberville.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for both of you being here and your service. General VanHerck, just follow up on Senator King's question. How would Maxar and Celdrone help you in the Arctic? Would it be, commercially, how would that help you?
Can you say that again?
Maxar and Celdrone, would it help you in the Arctic?
I'm not familiar with specifically. I'm familiar with the OneWeb efforts, Starlink, the satellite communications. Anything that gives me additional domain awareness, data and information sharing will absolutely help in the Arctic. It's very challenging above 65 north to communicate, to share data, to share information.
Thank you. And I don't want to pound on this balloon nonsense, but how would you assess your relationship with your Canadian counterparts through this entire scenario?
I think my relationship with our Canadian counterparts, by the way, I have a boss in Canada, General Wayne Eyre, is exceptional.
He runs NORAD, is that NORAD, right? I mean,
no, I run NORAD. He's the chief of the defense staff.
Okay.
In Canada. He is the CHOD. Okay, he's their senior military member.
So your relationship was good through this whole scenario?
Absolutely.
Yeah. If that same balloon took off today, same path, loaded the same way, now that we know what was on it, that we brought it down, should or would we shoot it down?
That's a policy decision. My job is to maintain options. I did that. I'm very comfortable that we had options from the moment we detected it until the moment we shot it down. Ultimately, should is a policy decision. That's not a military decision.
Okay, thank you. General Richardson, thanks for being here today, and thanks for the hospitality last week. Coming to Southcom, you got a great organization, people working for you, they're outstanding. We learned a lot. I would hope that, we have more people come down that way, would look at your new program that you're building, quarters for your personnel through Lend-Lease, which I think we should look at through the Air Force and through the Navy, because I think we need to privatize more things on bases to cut back on costs. But look forward to seeing how that turns out. Could you comment on that?
Well, thank you, Senator. That's for our family housing for our service members in Miami, and certainly a really tough housing market. And this will absolutely get after being able to counter all of those really high prices in a big city like Miami. And so we're very thankful that we're able to get that off the ground. And with the support of Congress, we've been able to do that. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks. And we're looking forward to see how that works out. And was very impressed with people after I go to Panama that were there. Actually, from my state of Alabama, Mobile, the Corps of Engineers are down there working, and we got a lot of good people. Just tell us how important, in your eyes, the Panama Canal is to us here in the United States, in your eyes, since you've been there.
Well, Senator, so the more than 70% of our global goods go through the Panama Canal for the United States. And so the importance to the global economy, though, it's not just about what the United States gets, but that's the give back through that canal being open at the exchange of goods across the world. I talked about trade before. Over $740 billion in trade, and so very, very important to the global economy for the Panama Canal.
And on top of that, and recently, over the last few years, China has signed 30 contracts with the Panamanians, some of it to do with the canal, and Panamanians are now trying to get out of some of those contracts because the Chinese have breached some of those contracts, which we need, as the United States of America, protect Panama, because that's how important it is to all of us. But really good people down there. Could you talk a little bit about the two Iranian ships that are parked outside the Panama Canal and the process that we need to look at? Do they need to be able to use the Panama Canal?
And so in terms of the Iranian warships that transited into the Southcom region and since departed, but as part of their announcing their global voyage to go around the globe, and certainly some of the countries that were able to deny port calls and things like that. But very concerning because they were just in the region 2 years ago with missiles and with launchers on those same two ships. And so very, very concerned that they're transiting again. We did not have the intelligence that they had this cargo on board this time, but still the fact that they came into the region again and doing a global voyage is concerning.
Thank you. Thank you for your service, General VanHerck. Thank you very much for what you've done for our country. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Tuberville. Senator Warren, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for your service. The Pentagon's budget request is $842 billion. This is one of the largest requests in history, but it is not enough money for many components of DoD. Each year, they push to get even more money using unfunded priorities lists, or what I call wish lists. Now, our colleagues on both sides of the aisle are concerned about this, and they want to see this practice stop. One of the excuses that I've received as I've asked about these lists is that they reflect emerging threats that can't be accommodated in the regular budget process. Now, we have transfer and reprogramming authority to account for exactly that situation. But even so, let's assume that's true. That means wish lists would only include items that hadn't been requested before. You couldn't know about it when you put your budget together. General VanHerck, last year, your unfunded priority list contained a request for $50 million for missile defense. Is that right?
For this year or last year?
Last year.
I'd have to go back and review it. I believe
Well,
that's correct.
I'll tell you, it's there. I understand you may not remember all the details, but it's there. Had you requested funding for that program before?
Yes, I will, in this year's list as well, everything on my unfunded list.
So let me just be clear. I'm just trying to track this one argument, and that is this some unexpected expense? You knew about it last year. How do I know you knew about it last year? Because you'd also requested funding for it from the year before. In other words, this is not an unexpected requirement for missile defense that you're trying to get funded through the unfunded priorities list. Is that right?
Senator, everything on my unfunded priority list, I palmed for, asked for, it was not funded.
I have no doubt
Senator,
that it was not.
please allow me to finish.
I have no doubt that it was not.
Can I finish answering your question?
I am the one asking the question here. Was this on your list before? And was it a surprise what you put on your unfunded priority list?
There are no surprises on my unfunded priority list.
That's what I
All
need
of those
to know.
were palmed for. They're all missions I'm tasked to do, which I'm not resourced to do, and the law directs me to put in an unfunded list within 10 days of the budget, which is exactly what I did.
Excuse me, the law does not require that you put in any request. We know last year that 2 different divisions actually put in requests of 0. They did not go to an unfunded priorities list. Now, General Richardson, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities have repeatedly appeared on your wish list as well. As commander of Southern Command, you were on the front line confronting transnational criminal organizations, trafficking drugs in regions there and at home. And I appreciate that work. Last year, you asked for an additional $268 million on your wish list. Now, General Richardson, did DoD approve reprogramming money for any of the missions under your command this year?
So this year, in terms of the funding that I've received, I have $130 million for security cooperation for the region, and so in terms of the reprogramming, I'm not aware of that.
Well, according to the controller's website, $750 million was reprogrammed to support drug interdiction. Does that sound about right to you?
I'm not tracking the 750, Senator.
Okay. All right. But look, here's the point I want to make on this. DoD already has the tools to reshuffle its resources when needed. Not only that, they have also done so for a key Southcom mission in an amount that was almost 3 times larger than your wish list. Both of you have already submitted your lists for this year. I'll be submitting questions for the record to learn more about why you couldn't include these in your budget priorities. I understand you want more money, but you have to work within the budget that is given to you. That's what every other part of the government has to do. I've got a bill with Senator King, Senator Lee, Senator Braun, that would end the statutory requirement for these lists. But I want to make clear, DOD could shut them down on their own right now. We don't let any other part of government behave like this, and for good reason. The budget process is about making tough choices and setting clear priorities. And refusal to demonstrate leadership here, I think, is a real mistake.
Chairman, I want to correct the record.
Yes,
100%
sir.
of my items on my unfunded priority list were submitted as part of the budget process.
I understand, sir. Any other comments, General Richardson?
The same here, Senator. Those requirements that I put forward to the department as well.
I don't think I quite understand what our witnesses are saying here.
I think what they wanted was to be able to fully respond to your question, Senator, and with that, I would...
But these are not on their budget now.
I think the time has expired. Thank you very much. Senator Schmidt, and I'd like Senator Rosen will preside as I go to the Appropriations Committee. Senator Schmidt, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank you both for being here. I would note to the committee that both of these witnesses have Missouri ties, so, and Missouri roots. It's my belief, and I've talked about a little bit in this committee before, that too few people, quite frankly, understand the urgency, the gravity, and the proximity of the threat that the PRC, China, poses to the United States of America. They are rapid development as, being a militarized power now, and projecting that power is very real. And it's that proximity that I want to ask both of you separate questions about, given your roles. The Belt and Road Initiative clearly is an initiative to further their economic, militaristic, and political goals. And the dual use that they get out of this once they're involved with these countries is very real. And so, General Richardson, I wanted to ask you that it seems to me that China's gaining far too much traction in the Western Hemisphere if we sort of look at this under the old Monroe Doctrine in the Western Hemisphere. They continually abuse, not just the debt traps that are established, but they abuse those agreements to then later expand militarily. Could you talk about a couple of those examples that you see? And if you were, and this is sort of, Senator Scott, I think, has had a great line of questioning about how we can better explain to our folks back home the real risks. So from your perspective, a couple of examples that you would want to highlight that raise real concerns for you in the Western Hemisphere.
So that Belt and Road Initiative, Senator, that you talk about, that's really the guise or the disguise of how I see that the PRC gets their foot in the door to expand and a lot of these projects into the critical infrastructure for the partner nations. And so when you're talking deep water ports in 17 countries, the telecommunications, the 5G backbone in 5 of the countries, 24 countries having the PRC, 3G or 4G, and I worry about that. The stealing of information, there have been numerous cyber attacks of our partner nations in the region. And you have a communist nation that doesn't respect the human rights of their own people with Huawei and ZTE and fostering this out to all of the other partner nations across the globe, not just in my region. So they don't respect the human rights of their own people. They're not going to respect the human rights of every other nation. And so that's a huge concern in terms of the telecommunications. The space infrastructure, 11 space-enabling infrastructure sites in 5 countries in the region as well. So it's very, very concerning, especially with the dual use that they come in. They're state-owned enterprises from the PRC, which means that they can be used for military application at a later date, if needed or wanted.
General VanHerck, we've talked about before in classified briefings here and in previous settings about the Chinese spy balloon, fiasco, and showed how brazen the Chinese Communist Party is willing to be to gain intelligence. I think that opened the eyes of a lot of Americans of just how, again, how brazen they were. But one obvious concern is that they won't just send a spy balloon, right? There'll be something else. And you've talked about awareness. What are specifically a couple of things that this committee can do to help with that?
We need to continue to accelerate domain awareness capabilities. The department has done a good job with recognizing my domain awareness capability gaps, which includes funding over-the-horizon radar. But we need to think differently about how we field capabilities in a more timely and rapid manner using digital technology we have today vice industrial age processes. And you can help with encouraging that and moving forward with that, and also encouraging testing, development, and when there are failures, let's not stop everything. Let's move forward more quickly to the field and rapidly develop capabilities.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Peters, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. General VanHerck, I would like to build on the concerns you mentioned in your earlier testimony regarding cyber attacks here in the homeland. And specifically, could you further explain some of your gaps with authorities, personnel, and instructions for synchronizing and responding to cyber attacks affecting local defense communities, and how you would coordinate with the Department of Homeland Security in the event of such an attack?
Senator, thank you. First, my largest domain awareness gap and my biggest concern is actually cyber domain awareness. The vast majority of the critical infrastructure in our homeland resides outside of DoD, which General Nakasone is responsible for, and outside other federal networks, which Jen Easterly at CISA is responsible for. My authorities there are limited to have domain awareness. FISA 702 is crucial to having domain awareness, to giving us indicators of potential threats in the homeland, whether they be violent extremist threats or whether they be peer threats. And so I would encourage that we continue doing that to give the National Security Agency and General Nakasone the ability to help fill those domain awareness gaps. My responsibility for cyber is I have 2 cyber protection teams that defend my critical infrastructure in my headquarters. More broadly, General Nakasone is responsible for the DoDN. I'm responsible for providing defense support to civil authorities. So, for example, if Jen Easterly at CISA needs support and DoD is going to provide Title X support, that support will go through me to provide, just like I do for hurricane or wildfire response.
Well, I chair our Homeland Security Committee here in the Senate and work on the cyber issues, so I look forward to working closely with you as to how we coordinate that, because there's no question that cyber is one of the most significant threats we face in the homeland on a daily basis. And I want to give you throw out an example of this and get your response. So let's take an example in Fayetteville, North Carolina, home to the Army Special Operations Command and the Immediate Response Force. If they had suffered a cyber attack to degrade the mobilization and deployment of the 82nd Airborne Division in response to some crisis, would your command have the appropriate authorities and personnel to respond and to mitigate? Do you have concerns, and are those things we should be looking at pretty seriously?
We should talk in a classified environment about potential impacts, but to respond to the actual cyber incident, that's going to be General Nakasone, or if it's outside of the DoDN, it's going to be Jen Easterly. I'm comfortable that I have everything I need to do to respond to provide defense support of civil authorities should we be tasked to do that to support a lead federal agency. Again, it's a concern for me to not have domain awareness in the cyber domain about potential threats.
Well, I look forward to discussions in a secure environment as we further examine that to make sure that it's working properly. The other question I have for you is, you discussed the challenges of ensuring that the Joint Force is able to operate in the Arctic, and your challenge to respond to potential threats with forces that are either organic to the National Guard command structures or assigned to external combatant commands. And given the awareness at Northcom of the potential threats in the Arctic, and I think I'm asking this question before Senator Sullivan can ask you a question related to this, but I'm sure will be coming. Given that awareness, would you recommend the services prioritize Arctic training and cold weather operational readiness for units who may be ultimately assigned to your command? And when I say Arctic training, that doesn't necessarily mean necessarily in Alaska, but also other cold weather environments like the state of Michigan with our training facilities there.
Senator, absolutely I would. 52% of my AOR is in the Arctic, in the Northcom AOR. And as I said earlier, I'm tasked to monitor and respond. On the respond piece, it is crucial that we conduct training operations. It's also crucial for campaigning to demonstrate we have the capability, the readiness, the responsiveness, and the resiliency to operate in the Arctic day to day as part of our campaigning plan. It's also crucial that we invest in research and development to ensure that our platforms are able to sustain and operate, and the human is able to sustain and operate in this environment. I think we have work still to be done there.
Thank you, General. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Scott, you're recognized.
Thank you. I thank both of you for what you do. Thanks for your hard work to try to take care of the national security. General Richardson, can you talk a little bit about, first, your ability to sort of watch what's happening in the area that you're responsible for, and do you have the resources you need to be able to monitor what's going on, and do you have good partners with the military and countries outside of our country?
So we have outstanding partners, Senator, that want to work with us, and very willing partners. And to be able to see everything, see the malign activity, be able to spot it, be able to go after it, you got to see it in order to go after it. And so the domain awareness, as I've talked to this committee before, I get about 2% of the DoD ISR, gets after about 17% of my requirement. And I would just say in terms of the urgency right now being at an all-time high, narcotics flow being at an all-time high, my capability and capacity to see is at an all-time low for my allocated resources.
So what do you need?
So I would need the resourcing in terms of the platforms. I would say in terms of allocated forces, the ideal platform would be a P8 with a long dwell, long duration, being able to see. I would say anywhere from 4 to 6, which is what Southcom had a couple of years ago, and those went away about a year ago in January. And also for our partner nations, their ability to see as well, the ground-based radars are very important.
So Guyana now is a rich country with lots of oil, and they've got a lot of bad actors around them. From a national security standpoint for us, and also to make sure they continue their democracy, what support do we need to provide, and what support can you provide?
That is a very willing partner, Guyana, and the relationship that we have with Guyana, fastest growing economy in the world right now because of the light sweet crude that was discovered off their shores. But they are very vulnerable in terms of their capacity and being able to, our embassy there needs to be a little bit bigger to help them channel and guide them with all these new additional resources. My little DoD team needs to be a little bit bigger as well. But they can be a stabilizing factor in the region, Guyana, just by fact of where they're located. They're a neighbor to Venezuela, also to Brazil and Suriname, but a very willing partner.
Thank you. Joe VanHerck. Southern border, there's been conversation in D.C. that the military could go in and secure the entire southern border, and I know we have National Guard down there that are helping the southern border. Without taking a policy position whether we should or shouldn't do it, is there really the ability, does the military really have the ability to have much of an influence on the security of their southern border?
Senator, within the authorities we have, we can't do that, but our military, the most professional, capable on the planet, if tasked to do that, absolutely we could. That's a policy decision, as you alluded to. We have incredible capability to do whatever we desire to do as the United States military.
So, and I'm sorry you might have answered this question before I got here. Talk about hypersonics and our ability to defend ourselves against hypersonics.
I'm not tasked to defend against hypersonics in the homeland, with the exception of cruise missiles. Where I'm most concerned is about my ability to detect and provide threat warning as the NORAD commander and attack assessment because of the erosion of strategic stability that has for providing continuity of government and nuclear force posture survival.
All right.
We can talk more in a classified session. I'll give you some more details.
All right. Thank you.
Senator Kelly, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. General Richardson, I want to follow up a little bit on Senator Scott's question about what you need in Southcom, and then the same for Northcom. Just recognizing that, my state of Arizona, has 370 miles of border with Mexico, and just the amount of transnational criminal organizations that are operating south of the border, and the fentanyl that is coming from, chemicals that come from China into Mexico, manufactured there, and then come across our border, is killing tens of thousands of Americans every single year. That's unacceptable. You talked about needing 4 to 6 P-8s. How long ago was it that you had a single P-8?
A year ago in January, the P-8s were retasked to another area.
And when, how many did you have then?
At that time, it was 2.
You had 2?
From a high of 6.
And you feel you need 4 to 6. General VanHerck, do you have P-8s available?
I get a little more ISR than General Richardson does, but my ISR request is pretty much on a not to interfere basis what I get along the southwest border. Now, Senator, you have to realize that I'm limited on collecting intelligence in the homeland by the law, and so therefore you can't expect me to be able to do that on this side. We do try to get the additional information on the other side of the border as well, on transnational criminal organizations, as well as the National Security Agency helping us.
So you can't fly the airplane south of the border without permission from Mexico, but can you fly a P-8 along the border and get some valuable information? I mean, is there something that?
So we do fly
Utility?
U-2s and RC-135s, not necessarily P-8, to gather information about threats to the homeland that emanate from all of our borders, not just the southwest border. My actual allocation of that ISR is very low compared to forward geographic combatant commanders.
But does Northcom have P-8s available right now?
I have P-8s available, one allocated to me for maritime homeland defense, which would be in support of submarine activity, not necessarily southwest border activity.
And where's that airplane
That
currently based?
airplane is in Whidbey Island, Washington.
Okay. I imagine it probably has a significant op tempo to it right now.
Well, it's not one airplane. It's an entire organization wing up there. The one airplane is access to a single airplane. They're continually doing their mission training and support. I get access to that one airplane under the Maritime Homeland Defense XORD.
What do you think we would need to do to provide like a detachment to Southcom?
Is that for me?
Either of you.
Senator, if I might be able to talk about security cooperation in addition to the ISR capability, because our partner nations, that security cooperation is my main lever in Southcom, and being able to train and equip our partners to be able to handle and counter the effects of the transnational criminal organizations, which are at the top of their list that they deal with every single day. The TCOs are way more powerful, they're more sophisticated, they're 5 times more than all the defense budgets added together for my entire region of partner nations. And we have got to really get after that. But the foreign military sales, foreign military financing, excess defense articles, we've got to speed that process up, because every delay in a piece of equipment, a little goes a long way in this region. I don't need big aircraft carriers. Our partner nations don't need big brigades of soldiers or helicopters, but they need 5 or 6 helicopters, a maritime patrol aircraft, a King Air 250. I mean, these go a long way for them, But every delay in that, it means our partner isn't in the fight with us. And so we need to make them stronger to counter the powerful TCOs.
Senator, I'd just like to follow up. We're not going to interdict our way out of this problem. It's part of the transnational criminal organization model. What we're attacking is the symptoms of the problem. That's the human migration, counter-narcotics trafficking, those kinds of things. The problem is transnational criminal organizations and their network. And so I'm encouraged. I just sit through the interdiction committee. It's chaired by the Commandant of the Coast Guard with interagency support. And there's a great strategy out of the Office of National Drug Control Policy to get after this. The challenge is operationalizing that strategy across all the entities of the government who have a hand in this. You can't have multiple entities all doing their own thing. And so I don't see this as a DOD lead, but I do think we need a lead federal agency empowered to get after the problem that you're talking about across multiple agencies across our nation.
Thank you, General VanHerck and General Richardson. And my office will follow up.
Thank you, Senator Kelly. Senator Ernst, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you both for your time this morning. This testimony is important to this committee because right now our adversaries are probing our homeland and really looking for weakness right here in our hemisphere. Our homeland is no longer a sanctuary. So thank you again. General Richardson, your statement cites at least 11 China-linked space facilities across 5 different countries in the region. And this is more than any other area of responsibility that we see around the globe. So what are the national security implications of these particular space facilities?
Well, just the ability for the Chinese to be able to track and launch their own satellites, but then also the ability to surveil not just the United States, but our partner nation satellites as well across the globe.
Right, and what are you doing to mitigate that surveillance that you spoke of? Are there things that we can do?
So we're partnering together, of course, with Spacecom, with Northcom. We hosted the space conference, the very first inaugural space conference of the Americas, bringing all of the spacefaring nations together to talk about responsible space operations. And also the capabilities and being able to get after, the malign activity possibly associated with those. It's always under supposed research and development and that sort of thing. And the concern is maybe it's not.
Right, that is my concern. And what are we doing then to prevent more of these space facilities from being located in your AOR?
So I think just working with the partner nations, with the governments in terms of the responsible space operations and things like that, and the talking about and discussing and warning, the possibilities associated with it.
Again, relationships matter. So it's very, very important in this region specifically. General Richardson, during your confirmation, you committed to notify Congress if China emplaces long-range missiles in the area of operations. How do you assess the risk of this in the midterm?
So I assess all the development and the Belt and Road Initiative and the critical infrastructure as just setting the theater or setting the table, if you want to put it that way, in terms of possible basing and that sort of thing in the future. I would say that we're probably about 7 to 10 years behind what's happened in Africa. And with the state-owned enterprises from the Chinese in the region, I worry about the dual-use capability and used for military application.
Right, I do as well. And what more can we do for Southcom to prevent China from continuing to expand in the region?
Well, I would say that Team U.S.A. can do a better job in terms of tooting our own horn about all the investment from the private sector all the way to what I do in the military and defense sector. Foreign military sales and foreign military financing, excess defense articles, training and equipping is really what we get after. We introduced the Inter-American Defense College that's behind me here for their professional development session. Our schools are so important to build trust with our partner nations, that we can communicate, talk in the same language. And that's what I really bring to the table, is being able to work with our partner nations and building that trust so we can counter the malign activity together.
I think that is so important. Again, those relationships matter in this area of operations. And you normally place in front of us what we call a placemat that shows the region and Russian influence, Chinese influence. I just want to make sure that it's very clear to everyone that is watching today, listening to us, that they understand that while China is our pacing threat and we focus on the Indo-PACOM, we have to recognize that they are in this hemisphere as well. They are here. They are everywhere around us. They are building space facilities. They are building other points of operation, and they're in our backyard. So while we do focus on the Indo-PACOM, it's very, very important. We've got to focus here as well and understand that they are surrounding us, and we've got to do more about that. And General VanHerck, just in the remaining few seconds that we have, what would be the homeland defense implications of persistent Russia or Chinese cruise missile submarines off of our coasts? Do you assess this risk is increasing or decreasing?
It's absolutely increasing. Within the last year, Russia's also placed their Sev-class submarines in the Pacific. So now not only the Atlantic, we have them in the Pacific, and it's just a matter of probably a year or two before that's a persistent threat, 24 hours a day potentially. That impact is reduced decision space for a nation's senior leader in a time of crisis.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And again, thank you both so much for your service and dedication to protecting our homeland. I just want to emphasize again how important it is that we pay attention to Russia and China in this hemisphere as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ernst. Senator Rosen, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this important hearing, and I want to thank both Generals Richardson and VanHerck for testifying today, for your service, and General VanHerck, of course, for your service to our very own Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada. Thank you, and I'm going to build upon what so many others have already been talking about, our adversaries in our own backyard, China and Russia, 5G technology, all of that. General Richardson, you mentioned in your opening statement 24 countries in Southcom's AOR have existing 3G and 4G Chinese telecommunication infrastructure. Of course, we've been talking about the Belt and Road. An additional 5 countries have upgraded to Huawei's 5G network. And as has been discussed, this adoption of all this technology in your AOR, it is more than concerning. It impacts our national security and the security of all our regional partners. So again, I just want to build on what they've been asking. So what role do you, not just in countering the adoption of the 5G technology in Latin America, do you think there's ways to leverage public-private partnerships so you don't have to do everything? And can you speak to this and how you're doing that, please?
Absolutely, Senator. And the fact that traveling to the region and putting all of these data points together and hearing from the leaders in the region and then coming back here to the United States to talk to our private sector as well, and hear from them the billions of dollars of investment. But then when you hear of the big projects and tenders coming out from our partner nations, and then there's only 6 Chinese companies that compete for that project or the tender, then there's a disconnect there. And that's why I think that we've got to show the investment that our private sector is doing, which is billions. When I hear from them and talk to them, there's billions of investment into the region, and we've got to advertise that. Team USA is there. Our partners want to work with us. They will turn to us first, but their economies are hurting, and if we cannot do it fast enough, and our foreign military sales and our training and equipping sometimes is not as fast. They're on a political timeline of 1 term, which is 4 years. And so they're on a stopwatch to deliver for their people, not a calendar. So we've got to speed up our processes because they'll look to us first, but if we don't have capability to deliver, then they're going to look elsewhere to wherever they can get it.
I think accelerating the process and having a budget, not a CR, going through, everyone's talked about that. And General VanHerck, I want to speak with you a little bit about this, because we know Huawei is, and foreign-owned companies, you're responsible for our ICBM, our U.S. military installations and ICBM fields, our training ranges, obviously at Nellis. And we know that people are building these telecommunication sites nearby all of these so they can collect information. And so I know we're in an open setting, but can you talk about the threat this poses? What can we do? A public-private partnership, in your opinion, can you elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very concerned about Chinese communications infrastructure being built, not necessarily by Chinese, but with companies here in the United States in close proximity to national security locations. We have to keep an eye on that. That is a threat to our national security. It is an intelligence collection threat. It may be even a more broad threat. I would also point out in my AOR in the Bahamas, China is very aggressive. Their ambassador in the information space, they built a new embassy. Economic investment in the largest resort outside of China is right in the Bahamas, right off of our coast, sits right on top of the Navy's AUTEC test and training ranges, which there's potential collection there. They're interested in developing smart cities here in the region. I won't go into detail. I wouldn't have classified environment. Selling equipment that we or our partners utilize for assessment of goods crossing the border, all those kinds of things. I would also point out one of the main lessons from COVID for me was the supply chain and our supply chain vulnerabilities that we have farmed out so much to China. You know, when you get 80% of your pharmaceuticals from somebody that you may face in a crisis in the future, that's a national security imperative that we need to go look at.
Thank you. We just had a hearing about that in Homeland Security yesterday, bringing back particularly that pharmaceutical supply chain critical medications. I'm going to take my next question off the record, but I want you to elaborate on cyber domain awareness that you spoke about, but my time is up, so we'll just submit that. Thank you again.
Thank you, Senator Rosen. Senator Budd, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, thank you all both for being here. General Richardson, it was great to sit down with you yesterday, have a helpful conversation. Following up a little bit on Senator Rosen's questions about foreign military sales, I've got a couple of yes or no questions about the process, and I've asked similar questions of other combatant commanders. So, General Richardson, is the current FMS process fast and flexible enough to meet our foreign partners' security needs in your AOR?
No, Senator.
Does the transfer of U.S. defense articles build our partners' capacity to provide for their own defense?
Yes, it does, Senator.
Is China increasing arms exports to any other countries in your AOR?
Yes, Senator.
Is the United States still the security partner of choice in your AOR?
The U.S. is the security partner of choice, Senator, yes.
Thank you. Is the United States at risk of losing that security partner of choice status to China?
Yes, Senator.
And if you would explain a little bit about how FMS challenges are impacting strategic competition with China in your AOR.
Yes, so the ability to be able to deliver quickly, I think that there's also a backlog of from COVID and the impacts that our own private sector and industries had to take, and being able to not be a year or 2 years behind delivery. Again, that is, we don't need a lot in this region. A little goes a long way. And when we're talking about one country needing one King Air 250 maritime patrol aircraft or 4 coastal patrol vessels or 6 helos, we're talking about something that's not that large, but that they need to get after the transnational criminal organizations, the malign activity that occurs in their countries. And then that provides some stability. It curbs irregular migration. It keeps the flow down if our partner nations can provide that security and stability for their countries.
Thank you for that. General VanHerck, again, thank you for being here as well. The North Carolina National Guard currently has personnel mobilized to the southern border in support of CBP, Customs and Border Patrol. And we're very proud of them, and we want to make sure our troops have all the resources they need to help secure the border. Are there additional resources we could provide that would make the southwest border deployment more effective?
Senator, I'm comfortable with the resources I have based on the mission and authorities I have right now.
Thank you. So nothing else needed? They have everything they needed?
Their commanders have not asked for anything to me. They're working for me in their Title 10 mobilization capacity, and I'm not aware of any asks.
Thank you. And for both of you, we know that illicit drugs are not the only thing being trafficked through your AORs and into the United States. Human trafficking is an all too common occurrence. And just this week, we learned that groups of Chinese nationals are paying coyotes a premium to be smuggled across the southern border. And from your perspectives, what's driving this humanitarian crisis in your respective AORs, and what resources would be helpful to enhance your work in countering the human trafficking side? General Richardson first.
So I would say the security cooperation funding is my main lever, Senator, and that really empowers the partner nation militaries and their security forces to be able to handle that and that malign activity. And as you said, it's not just narcotics, it's human trafficking, it's illegal mining, it's illegal logging, illegal fishing, it's counterfeit goods. It's the whole money laundering piece. They're more powerful, they're more sophisticated, they're corrupt, and they drive violence and irregular migration. And strengthening our partner nations to be able to handle that is what makes them stronger, and then generally ends up helping us in the homeland where those malign activities don't end up on our southwest border.
Thank you. General VanHerck.
Yeah, thank you. So the problems I call the symptoms. It's the human trafficking, migration, those kinds of things are driven by an instability created by transnational criminal organizations. If you don't want your family to live within that environment, you're going to try to get out, and you're willing to pay whatever it is to get out of there. That's part of their business model. I would also say natural disasters. They've had several major hurricanes in Mexico and Central America within the last few years, and also COVID. That created an environment where folks who want to leave and they want to come to the United States, and transnational criminal organizations are seizing on that opportunity as part of their business model. We will not interdict our way out. This requires a strategy to go after transnational criminal organizations. We know how to do this as a nation. Cut off the funding, cut off the weapons, seize on those opportunities. Interdiction will not get us out of this problem.
Thank you both. My time has expired. Mr. Chairman, I'll be submitting a question for the record.
Thank you, Senator Budd. Senator Blumenthal, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you both for your service and for being here today. I want to focus on Russia for the moment, and particularly, General VanHerck, the resources that you have, NORAD and Northcom, in the Arctic area. Do you think those resources are sufficient to protect our national security? Should they be enhanced?
Senator, no. I don't think I have the infrastructure, the communications, the ability to respond and be persistent in the Arctic.
What kind of additional resources do you think should be provided?
Yeah, I would point back to the report that the NDAA directed me to do, that I provided to Congress, that gives a list of the challenges that I face. I need additional communications capability, data and information sharing, the ability to be persistent, so fuel north of Dutch Harbor, Alaska. We need to do more research and development on capabilities that are going to go into the Arctic, platforms to ensure they operate. When you send platforms into the Arctic and they're non-functioning, that's a concern for me. I can talk more in a classified environment. The infrastructure is the biggest concern. So in a layered defense concept, I need to have forces forward. That would include at Thule, Greenland, in Canada as well. So NORAD in Canada has to be part of this discussion as well. We need persistence. That requires icebreakers. We as a nation are in a bad shape when it comes to icebreakers, and I fully support the Coast Guard's plan. We need to go faster.
Coast Guard needs more icebreakers in that area. You agree?
I do agree.
General, have you seen any effect in terms of the Russian resources or threat as a result of the Ukrainian operation?
So I'm not aware of any direct kinetic threat to the homeland. We continue to monitor the cyber domain. and especially through their proxy actors. I can talk in a classified environment. I'm most concerned about that cyber domain. I would point out that while Russia appears to be a failure in the land domain in Ukraine, they still maintain significant strategic capabilities to hold our homeland at risk. And we've seen them just as active, actually more active globally, to include in the Northcom AOR, such as sailing the Gorshkov with hypersonic missiles just a couple of months ago through my AOR and into General Richardson AOR, and more persistent submarine activities that can hold our nation at risk.
Let me ask you both, maybe beginning with General Richardson. The Wagner Group has been very active in Ukraine. It's been very active in Africa. Have you seen any evidence of its malign activities in your command?
Russian malign activity is alive and well in Southcom. And in my statement, I talked about the disinformation campaign. Over 31 million followers now on Russia Today, Espanol, and Sputnik Mundo. They don't play by the rules. They don't have any rules. And they pose journalists to be legitimate journalists. They're not. Twitter bots are off the charts, and these especially increase right before elections in our partner nations. And so it's very concerning, but it's very much alive and well with Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, that Russia continues to keep their alliances with.
Thank you for that. That's very helpful. And do they operate also through proxies like the Wagner Group?
Yes, Senator, they do.
In your command, General VanHerck, what have you seen?
Russia is active. As you know, the Mexican military utilizes Russian helicopters. I would love to see those helicopters go. They have asked through foreign military sales for options. We don't move fast enough. The question we got earlier about foreign military sales to deliver capability to basically punt the Russians out of Mexico. I would also point out that from a space perspective, that Russia is active seeking under academic and research facilities, access for space monitoring in my AOR as well. I'll just leave it at that. I'll talk to you more in a classified environment about that. But it's alive and well right here in the Northcom and NORAD AOs.
Thank you. I agree with you about the helicopters. By the way, we should be providing American helicopters, not relying on Russian helicopters.
Yeah. Can I point out one more thing?
Sure.
I've been working for more than a year after I committed to provide radars to the Mexicans for domain awareness for transnational criminal organization and drug control. We still haven't been able to donate those radars. The process is too slow.
Thank you. Thank you both for your testimony. Very informative and helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal. Let me note the vote has started and recognize Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank both of the witnesses today for their outstanding service to our country and excellent testimony. General VanHerck, is this your last hearing?
It's my last hearing in front of this committee. I'm sure there will be others.
So I'm sure you're sad about that.
Senator, I actually enjoy the opportunity. It's a great chance to tell our story. I've been telling it for 3 years. Recent events have brought it further into the light.
Well, I want to compliment you both, but I want to compliment you in particular on your career in the military and your outstanding work that you did over the last several months. It was a busy time for Northcom, and I think you led the troops' Northern Command exceptionally well, not just the last couple months, but during your tenure. So thank you for that. I do want to reference. Can you do a quick shout out to the men and women in Alaska on their operations over the last couple months and what they were doing on a regular basis, whether it's Chinese spy balloons or Russian bear bombers? Just your thoughts very quickly on General Nahom and the team up there, including the Guard and Reserves.
Yeah, some exceptional work, not only in Alaska, but across the department, especially when it comes to the high-altitude balloon. That was PhD-level employment tracking, but most importantly, the engagement. That balloon went down, as you know, on the ice shelf off the coast of northern Alaska with limited infrastructure to support And the National Guard stepped up, Tory Sachs and his team, and General Nahom, to do incredible work in just incredibly challenging conditions and monitoring additional potential threats to our homeland. So I couldn't be more proud of the entire team.
Okay, thank you on that. And Mr. Chairman, I think this hearing has clearly highlighted the need for serious FMS reform. Senator Budd and I were in the Middle East on a CODEL with Senator Rosen, Senator Kelly, a number of us, and everywhere we went, our allies, our military were like, you got to fix FMS, it's killing us. So I think that's something we need to be looking at hard during this NDAA. General VanHerck, can you briefly touch on the highlighted challenges of domain awareness? You have been talking about this for 3 years, but I think the Chinese spy balloon and other recent activities have really driven home what you've been talking about and how we need to do it more rapidly and in a timely manner.
Yeah, so the bottom line, Senator, is if you can't detect something, you can't defeat it, and you certainly can't deter. And so what's happened since shock and awe, our operations in the Middle East, is Russia and China particularly have developed capabilities to hold our homeland at risk, to reduce our decision space, delay and disrupt our flow. My challenge is to detect those capabilities. We have assumed for decades that the homeland is a safe and secure environment, 2 moats on each side, friendly nations on each side. That model is gone, and my ability to detect those threats, whether they be undersea to on orbit and in cyberspace, has not kept pace with the threat. That reduces decision space for our nation's senior leader. It erodes strategic stability and increases the risk of strategic deterrence failure.
Let me ask you, it's a multi-part question, and I'd like you to answer it in the time I have left. But I've appreciated Senator Peters, King, Tuberville, Blumenthal all raising the issues of the Arctic and your ability to currently monitor and respond to threats against the homeland, specifically in the Arctic. Now, can you also explain why the Arctic, why the Alaska avenues of approach are so important, not just to Alaska? We want to protect the great state of Alaska, my state, but we also recognize, and you recognize, that Alaska often is the avenue of approach with our adversaries' weapon systems to attack the lower 48 if they were going to do that, whether that's Chicago, Miami, or New York. So could you explain a little bit on the issue of what you need more in the Arctic? I appreciate your leadership on this and the domain awareness issues that relate to the importance of those assets in Alaska, not just for Alaska, but for the whole country.
Yeah, Senator, so Alaska may be the most strategic location on the planet.
And I think I've said that a few times before here, Mr. Chairman, but
so
that's Billy Mitchell's famous quote, correct?
It is. So deploying from Alaska, short to the Indo-Pacific, short to the EUCOM AOR, shortest avenue approach for ballistic missiles from Russia, potentially China and DPRK to our homeland. You know, allowing China and Russia to move forward with putting ballistic missile submarines due to the ice now receding in close proximity to Alaska and our homeland seriously erodes my ability to provide adequate threat warning capabilities, domain awareness. So I hope the Air Force comes forward with an unfunded request to accelerate the wedge tail. The AWACS is worn out. We need a wedge tail, and we need it much faster so I can monitor things in the Arctic as well. The communication capabilities. I hope that terminals are funded for SpaceX, Starlink capabilities to give us the domain awareness, and that we accelerate over-the-horizon radar, and then more broadly think about globally integrated air and missile defense, which would include sensors in Alaska, strategic sensors in Alaska. We need to get long-range discriminating radar online sooner and utilize that data better for deterrence purposes, but if required, defeat purposes.
Great. Thanks again to both of you, and again, General, thank you for your outstanding service to our country for decades, and we very much appreciate it here on this committee.
Thank you, Senator Sullivan. General VanHerck, General Richardson, thank you for your outstanding testimony. today. We have a vote on, so we will vote, but I would announce that we'll reconvene in approximately 15 minutes in SV 217 for the closed session. With that, I will adjourn the open session, and thank you both.